Okay, good evening. My name is Dave Nordman. I am the executive editor of the Telegram Gazette, and I wanted to first thank the candidates, incumbent James McGovern and the challenger Tracy LaBorne, for joining us tonight for the Massachusetts 2nd Congressional District debate. With me here this evening are my fellow moderators. Starting closest to my right on down is Amalphus Rodriguez from Espresso Latin Radio, Robert Cox, managing partner at Bowditch and Dewey, and Shelley Rodman from the League of Women Voters. Before we begin, we want to thank our host sponsors, the Telegram Gazette, the Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce, the League of Women Voters, and Espresso Latin Radio. Also, a big thank you to the Mercantile Center here at 100 Front Street. We appreciate them hosting us here for this fireside debate. Tonight's debate format will be as follows. Questions will be posted to Candidate 1. Candidate 1 will have 2 minutes to answer. Candidate 2 will then have 2 minutes to respond to that answer. At that point, Candidate 1 will have 1 minute to respond, followed by Candidate 2 with a 1 minute rebuttal. We will then alternate who goes first after each question. Alex Garriola and David Sullivan from the Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce will be keeping time this evening. They will hold up 1 minute, 30 seconds, 15 seconds for your time management purposes. Each candidate will have 2 minutes at the beginning of this debate for their opening remarks and 2 minutes at the end for closing remarks. Per coin flip, attested by Brenda Elms, James McGovern will be first to do his opening remarks, which means Tracy LaBorne will be first for her closing remarks. Also per coin flip, again attested by Brenda Elms, James McGovern will go first on the initial question, and Tracy LaBorne will go first on the second question. We want to thank Espresso Latin Radio for being here to translate the debate for our Spanish-speaking listeners. Opening statement for incumbent James McGovern.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. I want to thank the TNG, the League of Women Voters, the Worcester Regional Chamber, and Espresso Radio for hosting. And thank you, Ms. LaBorne. I look forward to our conversation this evening. I also want to thank all of you at home who are watching right now. Right now, America faces an unprecedented economic and public health crisis. But we also face a crisis of character that asks who we want to be as Americans. Whether we want to provide health care for the sick or not. Whether we feed the hungry or not. Whether we can crush this virus or not. Whether we continue to serve as a beacon of hope and moral leadership in the world or not. Even though our challenges are many, I love this country, and I truly believe we can accomplish anything when we work together. That's why I have devoted my life to public service. I'm honored to be your voice in Congress. I'm a progressive Democrat. I'm a liberal Democrat. It's no secret. But first and foremost, I'm an American. And like all of you, I care about getting things done. And I am proud of my record of getting a lot done for this district. That's who we are here in Massachusetts. We are not talkers, we are doers. And that's the type of leadership we need as we dig out from this mess that this administration has created. I've helped over 1,000 constituents with problems caused by COVID-19, from tracking down stimulus checks to cutting through red tape for small businesses and their PPP loans. I've held teletown halls so that you can hear directly from trusted local officials and medical experts about how to be safe and how to keep your family safe. And so to the people who are watching, we have shared values. And I would like the opportunity to keep fighting on your behalf in Washington. I look forward to a productive conversation this evening. And again, thank you very much for hosting this debate.
Thank you, candidate LeBourne.
Thank you. Remember when our elected officials encouraged us and told us the only thing we have to fear is fear itself? And instead of pushing for false entitlements, they told us, ask what you can do for your country. I miss those days. My name's Tracy, I'm 48 years old, and I'm lucky enough to be married to my best friend for 26 years. I'm a mom of 2 sons that I love with all my heart. I'm a healthcare provider, an entrepreneur, a small business owner. I lost both my parents far too young, and I grew up on a farm. I know the meaning of hard work and sacrifice. The congressman has been saying throughout this election that this election is the most important election of our lifetime and that decency is on the ballot. I agree with him 100%. Throughout this pandemic, when we've needed them the most, we have watched as Congress has become more dysfunctional by the day. In fact, just a few weeks ago, our congressman sent out an email full of lies. He called me racist, he said I was full of hate, and he told people that I was a member of some weird, bizarre cult. All of this is absolutely appalling. It's no wonder that our Congress has a 17% approval rating. 17%. That's not just embarrassing, it's dangerous for our country, and it's wrong. I'm running to represent us because I'm ready to get to work righting these wrongs. I love this country and I defend our Constitution as it's written. I support the law and order, and I defend our police. I support smaller government, and I stand for personal freedoms. And I will be the strongest advocate down there for term limits. I'm an eternal optimist. I believe our best days are still ahead. I ask you for your vote because I know that the only way that we can get to those days is by us working together to make that happen. Thank you for hosting this tonight. Thank you for watching at home, and I too look forward to this conversation.
Thank you. And our first question is for Congressman McGovern from Ms. Rodriguez.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me. My name is Ms. Rodriguez and I'm from Congressional. Good evening everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Ms. Rodriguez and I'm from Espresso Latin Radio. And our first topic will be on immigration. According to the National Academy of Science, immigration is integral to the nation's economic growth. Also, 2/3 of undocumented immigrants have been living in the United States for more than 10 years, and many of them live with their children who are U.S. citizens. With a temporary protected status known as TPS expiring in January 2021, and the dreamers who are still waiting, based on this, will you support an immigration reform that will give them permanent residency?
Thank you very much for the question. It's an important question. America should be a place of hope and opportunity for everyone. We are a nation of immigrants. Our diversity is our strength. And it bothers me that immigration has become such a polarizing issue in our political discourse. You mentioned temporary protected status. I worked for Congressman Joe Moakley in the 1980s and 90s, and I helped write the TPS law. And it was designed to help people who were fleeing violence get some temporary peace of mind while their countries were in upheaval. So for Salvadorans and Guatemalans in particular, I support extending TPS and helping ultimately get them a pathway to citizenship. They have been incredible contributors to our economy. I support the Dreamers. I mean, Dreamers are people who came here when they were a couple of months old. And now they're adults, they're working as first responders, they're saving lives. And the idea that the President of the United States wants to send them back home is appalling to me. It goes against our values. Look, I believe in comprehensive immigration reform. I actually supported a bill that George W. Bush offered to try to fix our broken immigration system, to make it easier for people to immigrate here legally. But unfortunately, Republicans in the Senate and Republicans in the House derailed it. So look, we need to elect people who will want to get things done. I'm not a problem on immigration, but we have others who are. And so, in answer to your question, I look forward to passing immigration laws that not only are humane and decent, but reflect the values of this country. Thank you.
Candidate LaVorn, you have 2 minutes to answer.
We spoke about this a lot in 2018. Immigration has been a political football for decades. The congressman just mentioned how he's been trying, and he's been trying for decades. He has been able to accomplish absolutely zero when it comes to immigration reform. The T in TPS stood for temporary. Yes, we need a pathway. We need a pathway for TPS. We need a pathway for DACA residents. And more importantly, we need an immigration reform system that is based on moral, and it's just, and it's fair, it's attainable, and it's understandable. That it doesn't take 15 to 20 years to become a U.S. citizen. That it doesn't take $15,000, $20,000. Here in Massachusetts, we should be a leader in immigration reform. Not to blame Democrats, not to blame Republicans, but to actually get the work done. We need to be a leader for Massachusetts because 40% of our illegal immigrants that are in this country right now are here on expired visas. In Massachusetts, we have students on visas. We have workers on H-1B visas, and they are wonderful, amazing people, and they deserve to be citizens. We need to help them become citizens, but right now it is so convoluted, it is so confusing. Again, it takes too long, it's too expensive. We do not need to make it easy, but we do need to get it done. We've been talking about it for decades. It's time to change it up and make this happen and get it to work for all of us, including every one of the immigrants coming to our nation.
Congressman McGovern, 1 minute to you.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure whether that means Ms. LaVorn would oppose President Trump in his attempt to deport Dreamers or to end TPS. I hope it does, because that's a cruel policy. What's also a cruel policy is what's happening at our border. Him literally ripping children away from parents and denying people medical care. I've been to the border several times, and I've seen firsthand what's going on. Again, it betrays our values. He is violating U.S. law and international law when he denies asylum seekers the right to a hearing. Asylum are people for people who have a well-founded fear of persecution. If we send them back, they'll be killed, they'll be tortured, or they'll be jailed. They're being routinely denied that basic right. This is not who we are as a country. We can have responsible immigration laws and not lose our humanity.
Candidate LaVorn.
President Abraham Lincoln said that the best way to get rid of a bad law is to enforce it. It is not the President of the United States' job to make laws. It's his job to enforce them. It is on our Congress to make laws, fair, just, moral laws for immigration. Just because you're enforcing them and they're bad, that's on Congress. Congress needs to change the laws. Here in the United States, right now, today, there are, just here in Massachusetts, there's 25,000 children that have been separated by their parents that are living with the Department of Children's Services. You take away children from unsafe environments. So yes, that's what we do in our country. We take care of children, no doubt about it. It is on Congress to pass a law to make this happen, to make it better.
Great, thank you. Our next question is from Robert Cox, and this question goes to you, Candidate LaVorn.
Hi, thank you both for being here tonight. Our next topic will be on infrastructure. Roadways and bridges throughout the nation, including Massachusetts, need major upgrades and improvements. But since the COVID-19 pandemic hit, we realized that the definition of infrastructure upgrades must also include the expansion of broadband. As students and parents alike continue to learn and work remotely for the foreseeable future, should an infrastructure bill be an immediate priority? And what should that bill look like?
That's a great question, and yes, infrastructure has been, you said across the country it's a big deal. Massachusetts is, one of the oldest states in the country. Our infrastructure is absolutely horrific. We score a D-. on our needs. Yes, it includes broadband. You know, the 21st century is here, so broadband is huge. And with our homeschoolers, I believe here in Worcester, I don't know the exact percentage, but it's close to about 30%, I believe, of the children do not have access, you know, to home Wi-Fi. That is absolutely horrific when you're talking about trying to learn remotely. You know, when it comes to infrastructure as well, look at Massachusetts highway systems. We rank 5th, worse in the country when it comes to our highways. But our spending on our highways, it cost us $675,000 per state-controlled mile, when the national average is $160,000. Why is there such a discrepancy? Why does it take us so much more to make 1 square mile of highway than the rest of the world? If we can actually start getting in line with the rest of the country, we would have more money available to us for Wi-Fi. We'd have more money for us, you know, down in Boston, they got bridges. They got bike lanes on their bridges. We're out in Western Mass, our bridges are falling down. There's so much that we need to do, but we need to figure out why it's costing us $675,000 versus the national average of $160,000.
Congressman McGovern, your response.
Well, thank you very much, and maybe you can ask the governor why that's the case. But the bottom line is the entire country is rated like at a D- in terms of infrastructure, because we have neglected the problem. The last time we had an infrastructure bill was when I was on the Transportation Committee, and there were a lot of projects right here in Worcester, from Union Station to highway improvements to a number of other projects all across the district that benefited from that. The federal government needs to step up and pass a major infrastructure bill. We are an old state. We have bridges in Massachusetts that are older than some of the other states in the country. But it's not just bridges, and it's not just broadband. It's water and sewer facilities. It is schools. It is our mass transit. So what we tried, when Trump was running for president, he said he was interested in an infrastructure bill. I remember saying to somebody that that's one area where we might be able to have some agreement. But he's done nothing. He's come up with nothing. So we in the House passed a bill called the Moving Forward Act that we passed in July. It's a $1.5 trillion plan to invest in our communities, fixing our basic infrastructure. Look, if we don't invest in our infrastructure, our economy suffers. And on the broadband issue, you're right. I mean, when President Obama was president, we had a stimulus package that actually expanded broadband into underserved areas. That we get most of the job done. There's still more that we need to do. We need to get an infrastructure package so that our kids can have access to an education, especially during this pandemic. But we need to understand that infrastructure is key to economic development. If you go to China, they're investing like crazy in their airports and their roads and their bridges and in their mass transit. We're falling behind here. We're falling behind because we have some people that don't understand that there is a federal role, that we have to step up and have a big, bold infrastructure plan. We passed one in the House. I hope that the situation in the Congress changes so we can actually get a president who will sign it.
Candidate LaVorn.
You know, our infrastructure was crumbling and falling apart even more than 3-4 years ago. Even before President Trump took office, our infrastructure was absolutely horrific here in Massachusetts. Our drinking water needs in Massachusetts are estimated to be $12.24 billion. Our wastewater needs is $8.35 billion. There's 328 dams that are considered to be high hazard potential. It's absolutely horrific. It has not just been the last 4 years that this has been going on. It has been ongoing for decades. Again, our congressman has been in Congress for decades. For him to sit here and blame our current president for this issue is absolutely ridiculous and wrong.
One final minute to Congressman McGovern.
It sounds like you have a problem with Governor Baker, Ms. LaVorn. But the bottom line is that we need an infrastructure bill, and the House passed one. And the infrastructure bill that we passed when I was on the Transportation Committee, as I said, helped improve many of the crumbling roads and bridges in our district. But let me just point out one thing. Right now we're doing this 495-90 interchange project. That project is $296 million. That's how much it costs to do. Without a federal role, without a federal partner in this, there is no way that that project will get done. There is no way that we will make that interchange safer and more efficient for the commuters in this area. So, you know, we can talk about, you know, try to rationalize doing nothing, but doing nothing is not an option anymore, because it's not just the roads, bridges, and broadband, it is our economy. Our economy is dependent on a strong and vibrant infrastructure.
Thank you. Shifting gears to climate, our next question is from Shelley Rodman from the League of Women Voters. Shelley?
And let me add my thanks to both of you for being here this evening. While the League of Women Voters does not endorse candidates, the organization does take positions on policy matters. The League believes that climate change is a serious threat facing our nation and planet, and that a robust approach to combating climate change through energy conservation, air pollution controls, building resilience, and promotion of renewable resources is necessary to protect public health and defend the overall integrity of the global ecosystem. Where do you stand on this issue?
So it is probably one of the most important issues, if not the most important issue, facing the entire planet. And it is an issue that has been ignored for too long. The bottom line is that that U.S. leadership on the world stage is required for us to effectively deal with this. That's why it is unconscionable that this administration walked out of the Paris Climate Accord. We ought to be investing in green, clean, renewable energy. Unfortunately, this administration has prioritized coal again, which is one of the worst polluters in terms of energy. We need to understand that we need to set high goals, like reaching zero carbon emissions. We need to understand that even in terms of an infrastructure bill, there needs to be a green component to it as well. We need to understand that dealing with the climate is not just energy, it's also in farming practices, and it's also in a number of other sectors as well. And we also need to understand that, that if we don't get serious about this issue soon, then it will be too late. It is costly. The inaction has been costly. The cities have climate crisis plans because there's flooding. I do farm tours every year. Our farmers are dealing with droughts and severe weather patterns. They raise this issue all the time. This is not some topic that is discussed in elite classrooms. It is real. It is happening right now. And so, I, as the chairman of the Rules Committee, established a special select committee on the climate crisis, which has just finished its first report, which I think sets out a blueprint of steps that we need to take to be able to deal with this issue. But now is the time for big, bold action. I favor the Green New Deal. I think it sets out bold goals for us to try to achieve, and it's a direction we ought to be moving in.
Candidate LaVorn, your response.
Most definitely, yes, our climate is changing. We need to do everything to make sure that it, you know, our environment is here and secure for future generations. That's extremely important. But the Green New Deal, even Nancy Pelosi came out against the Green New Deal, calling it ridiculous. Not just the cows and the hamburgers and the airplanes and the tearing down of homes and rebuilding of buildings, and also the $93 trillion price tag. But in reality, you have to have a balanced solution. You have to have the understanding of how things work. For instance, you need coal to make the steel for the windmills. You need oil to transport the solar panels. And you need gas to generate the electricity to manufacture all the intrinsic systems and those components. So it's a balance. You cannot become reliant on any one form of energy. And yes, right now we are over-reliant on gas and coal, no doubt about it. We need to invest in the renewable energies so that we can get a better balance, and we will get there. In the United States, we're making progress every day on that. Our carbon emissions, we met the Paris Accord agreement, even without being in it. We have done a good job and we will continue to do better. But just to throw out coal, to throw out gas, that's absolutely, it just won't work. We need a balance of every one of those. Also, you got to look at manufacturing. We took our manufacturing, we have over-regulated our manufacturing so bad that it's all gone, let's say, to China. China produces over 30% of the carbon. We reward China for being a bad polluter by giving them our manufacturers. We need to bring our businesses back home so that we can regulate them. That alone will decrease China's carbon footprint.
Great. Thank you. Congressman McGovern, another minute to you.
Yeah, well, it's clear Mr. Warren hasn't read the Green New Deal because there's nothing about hamburgers in the Green New Deal, but I guess it's a Republican talking point. I would encourage you to read it. The other thing is that walking away from the Paris Climate Accord means that we have basically walked away from a leadership role in trying to contain climate change. And Ms. LeBourne mentions China, in terms of its greenhouse gas emissions, but the U.S. blows China out of the water on emissions per person in this country. So the notion that somehow we are on the right track, talk to the scientists. I mean, that's what I rely on. One of the things that really bothers me about some of the people in Congress and this administration is that they have contempt for science. Listen to the scientists, they'll tell you what's going on. And by the way, we are not doing very well. We are moving in the wrong direction in this country, and that's just a fact.
Candidate LeBourne, another minute to you.
You know, I did read the whole 2 pages of the Green New Deal. And it's absolutely, if it didn't mention hamburgers specifically, I believe it did mention cow flatulence.
Okay, sorry for the technical difficulties. Candidate LeBourne, if you'd like to have another 20 seconds just to finish what you had just mentioned, and the topic was on climate control.
I don't remember what the exact thing I said the last 20 seconds, but what it comes down to is that we need to lead by example in the United States. We can share our innovation like we always have. We come up with the best solutions, and then we share it with the world, and we lead again by example. We don't force people to do anything. We make sure that if we're doing what's right, people are going to continue and they're going to follow.
Great, thank you. And moving on to the second half of our debate, we'll stick with you, Candidate LeBourne, and our next question is from Amalphus Rodriguez.
Our next topic will be on Puerto Rico. In this year's election, the people of Puerto Rico will have the questions on their ballot to decide if they want the statehood or not. If they vote for their statehood, will you support it? And what will you do to make sure this doesn't get tabled at Congress like in previous occasions?
You know, that's an amazing question. Puerto Rico and statehood, this will be number 6. This will be the 6th time that they have voted on this. The biggest one that I recall was in 2012. It was a valid election. They voted for their statehood. It went to Congress. That was in 2012. And then in 2014, it went to committee and it died. I don't know why, honestly. That makes absolutely no sense to me. It is up to the citizens of Puerto Rico to decide, and I will support whatever the citizens of Puerto Rico decide. And once that's decided, I will work as hard as I can to make that come to fruition. Yeah, that's all I have. Yes, if they vote for it. But you know, the corruption in Puerto Rico has been horrible. We've known that for decades as well. In fact, the last time that there was an election, I think there was so much voter suppression that only 24% of the population came out to vote, where normally it's about 80%. And that's why the last time, I believe that was in 2017, that vote couldn't even count. So we got to first try to root out the corruption, make sure that there's safe, valid elections. what's happening right now, trying to get more industry down there, getting the pharmaceutical companies to come back to Puerto Rico, getting rid of the corruption, getting better paying jobs so that people can go live and not be under that. It's just horrible. I keep saying it, but the state corruption down there is so bad. So if we can get it safe, they can have a secure election and there's valid results, most definitely, I'll do everything I can to make sure that happens.
Great, thank you. Congressman?
Well, thank you very much. Puerto Rico is part of the United States, and you never know it, the way Washington has treated Puerto Rico. Washington has regarded Puerto Rico as a colony, and has treated people who live on the island as second-class citizens. I visited Puerto Rico twice after Hurricane Maria, and the indifference coming out of the White House and the ignorance, quite frankly, was shocking. President of the United States going down and throwing paper towels into a crowd, thinking that this somehow was going to provide comfort when they needed direct assistance to help rebuild. I went down several months later, and there were people who still had, plastic wrap over their roofs, tar mats over their roof, for their roofs, because the reconstruction aid never came. So here's my view. I respect the people who live on the island. If they decide that they want statehood, I'm all for it. They can get representation and Congress, and I think a greater voice. But if they decide not to, I respect that as well. The decision about the future of Puerto Rico's status should not be determined by any of us in this room or by any politician in Washington. It should be decided by the people of Puerto Rico. And again, I want to acknowledge the fact that our treatment of the people, even in terms of federal assistance over the years and reimbursement for things like Medicare and Medicaid, has been quite disappointing. So I stand with the people of Puerto Rico.
Candidate LeBorn.
If I'm not mistaken, Congressman, you were in Congress in 2012 when Puerto Rico did vote for statehood. Where were you then advocating for their needs? They're still voting. 2012 was 8 years ago, and it has gotten nothing but worse as far as the corruption down there. At least now we're getting focus. Again, to bring the pharmaceutical industry back to Puerto Rico, that's a game changer. To empower people with better jobs, to get them off of the dependence of their corrupt government, that is going to be absolutely phenomenal. So yes, if they vote for it again, I will support it 100%. But shame on our congressman sitting here saying that if they vote for it this time, he's going to help. He had plenty of opportunity in 2012, 2014, 2017, and now here it is, 2020, and it's the same story.
Congressman.
I think I've said enough on this. I want to go back to something that Ms. LeBorn said at the beginning of the debate. She took kind of a shot at me about some of the things I've said about things that she had said. Let me explain to you why I've been critical of her candidacy. She comes here and tells us that she wants to be a reasonable, rational voice, a moderate voice. And then I actually looked at her social media, her Facebook and her Twitter account. Ms. LeBorn, you call Democrats snowflakes. You say we're a disgusting lot. You say Democrats hate our country. You said on your Facebook page, Twitter page, that Senator Harris was only chosen as vice president because she was black. You liked a tweet that said John Lewis did nothing other than get himself beat up, a great civil rights hero. You posted on your Facebook page that Black Lives Matter is a Marxist terrorist organization. I mean, I will be honest with you, if that's your idea of trying to bring people together, I don't think we want any of it. Those aren't our values in this district, and quite frankly, I find them appalling.
Thank you, Congressman. We will move on to the next subject. Our next.
Wait.
Yep.
He went totally off.
I'll give you 30 seconds.
At least 30 seconds. I appreciate it.
I'll give you 30, and I'll give the Congressman an equal amount of response time.
I'll appreciate it, because I'm
No
not
problem.
going to attack back. I'm not on the ropes here. My Twitter account, my Facebook, it's wide open. Go look at it. The congressman can be up against the ropes, and so he felt bad, so he came out and tried to attack me. There is nothing to attack. The only thing that just came out of his mouth that was not a lie is, yes, I have called the Black Lives Matter organization a Marxist group. And you can go online and find out who the founders are, and they will tell you exactly who they are. They are Marxist trained. That's just fact, Congressman. Anybody else, go look for yourself.
Congressman, 45 seconds.
So Black Lives Matter is a noble movement for civil rights and equality. I mean, what you just said is awful. And you also give oxygen to groups like QAnon. The president does too. The president says they like him. QAnon is a sick cult that exploits exploited children. They're the ones who were responsible for Pizzagate. Remember that? Where they said that Hillary Clinton and John Podesta were running a child trafficking ring out of a pizza parlor in Washington, and a guy shows up with a gun while parents are having dinner with their children. Trump's own FBI says it is a domestic terror threat. But for you to ridicule a movement on civil rights, a movement for equality and justice, I find appalling.
You can't not let me talk.
Yep. 30
Because-
seconds to you, candidate LeBon.
You know, we're just going to go back and forth. Again, if you hear exactly what I said that the Black Lives Matter organization is a Marxist group. That has nothing to do with the Black Lives Matter movement. Did Black Lives matter? Of course they matter. Yes, Black Lives Matter. I have said that over and over in this campaign. But you cannot deny that the organization that has been being very disruptive to our country, they are founded by a Marxist group.
A final 30 seconds for the congressman.
Well, I don't know how to respond to any of that. Maybe this is a QAnon conspiracy. But the bottom line is that Black Lives Matter is a noble movement. A movement is a continuation of what John Lewis and Martin Luther King tried to do to achieve a country where there is more justice and equality, a country that is more fair. And that's the kind of country I want.
Congressman, moving on to the economy, the next question is from Robert Cox.
Well, let me take you in a different direction on the economy. All sectors of the economy have been affected by the pandemic one way or another, especially our small businesses. One of the hardest hit has been our hospitality industry. Here in Massachusetts, it has been reported that 1 in 5 restaurants have permanently closed. Although the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP, helped initially, many of our currently open restaurants are reporting that those funds have already been depleted, and without further help, they too will have to close. What can be done in Washington to keep these small businesses open and to get them through the crisis?
Well, that's a very good question, and it's a question that it's a question that the Senate should be dealing with right now, instead of trying to shove down the throats of the American people a Supreme Court justice who is, it represents the extreme right. We are in a crisis right now, and I've toured restaurants all throughout this district, and many of them are just barely holding on. The PPP was helpful to many of them. They were expecting a second round of help. We passed a thing called the HEROES Act 6 months ago. It's been sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk collecting dust ever since. We then negotiated with ourselves and cut the bill down by $1.3 trillion. Again, nothing. Then the president says he wants to deal, and then he says he doesn't want to deal, and then he says he wants something smaller, and then he says he wants something bigger than what Democrats are offering. So I have whiplash trying to follow him day to day. As we speak, Speaker Pelosi is in conversations with Secretary Mnuchin trying to see whether we can work out a deal. But I'm a co-sponsor of a bill called the Restaurant Act, which will provide direct assistance to restaurants to help get them through these next few months. And in the winter, it's going to be very tough for restaurants in Massachusetts. But we have laid out a plan, an option as a way to move forward. And let me just say this. In terms of the overall economy, we are not going to get this economy back on the right track until we crush this virus. And that is one of the reasons why people like me have been so critical of this White House, because there's no plan. There is no plan. We have to have a plan we all can buy into, because unless we can make it safe for people to feel they go back to work or go into a restaurant, or to go back to their offices, we are not going to see this economy recover. And by the way, in that HEROES Act is also important direct aid to state and local governments. So we're not firing first responders like our firefighters and our police officers. All those things are important. So we have laid out a way. Let's hope that Secretary Mnuchin and Speaker Pelosi can reach an agreement. If they can, I'll be on the next plane to Washington to report it on the Rules Committee.
Thank you, Candidate LeBorn.
That revised HEROES Act scaled that bill down to still close to 3,000 pages. 3,000 pages. That is absolutely ridiculous. Yes, there was some good, much needed items in that HEROES Act, and we need them. We needed them months ago. But instead, if you get down into it, what the big fight is over, you got $1,200 per person that's in this country, not even legally. They want to bail out the blue states, not just for their coronavirus expenses, but for their historical losses, the Democrat cities. You got ballot harvesting. You got elimination of voter ID in states that have already voted for voter ID. You have eliminating of the witness signature for voting. You basically take away the state's control for federal elections. They also want to release violent criminals from jail, and you're also implementing the Green New Deal, all with this HEROES Act. That's what's happening with this act. Just like every other House bill, Congressman, you said as the Rules Committee Chair, you were gonna go down there and be bipartisan. You have the least number of minority amendments ever in Congress. We're 116th Congress. He has allowed the least amount of minority amendments. So what do you think is going to happen when those bills get passed in the House and they go over to a Republican Senate? They're not going to go anywhere. That's not the way you get work done. We got to carve apart this bill, and we have to pass it in pieces that make sense so that we can get to the doing of helping. I'm a small business owner. I'm the only one up here that's ever signed the front of a check. I had to close my business down for 4 months. I've lived this. I've lived it on this end.
Congressman, a minute to you.
So, yeah, it is a big bill, but this is a big problem. Maybe you don't appreciate that because there's nothing on your webpage that is dedicated to your plan on COVID-19, but it is a big deal. Restaurants are about to close. Cities and towns are going to be forced to lay off police officers and firefighters. We have small businesses that are on the brink. We have people who are hungry in this country because hunger has gotten worse. So yeah, this is a big deal. It is a big deal, and it requires a big response. Not little crumbs thrown at one little problem and let's make believe we've done our job. That's not doing our job. And I'm sorry that there's not consensus in the Senate as to how we should proceed. Maybe Speaker Pelosi can work out something with Secretary Mnuchin, but we need a big response because this has been a big problem in large part due to the incompetence of the way this White House has handled this pandemic.
One final minute to Candidate LeBorn.
You know, it is a big deal. I just don't understand what releasing criminals has to do with it. I have no idea why taking away state control from our federal elections, what does that have to do with the coronavirus? None of that makes sense. It is very easy to go down and fix this, but for some reason they're choosing not to. And yes, this is a big deal, no doubt about it. But quite frankly, there's a lot more that we could do just by simply listening to the World Health Organization and realizing that prolonged lockdowns are actually causing more potential harm than good at this point. We need to protect those that need to be protected. We need to make sure that we're managing this problem instead of continuing to allow this problem to manage us. We know who this virus affects. We need to protect them And we need to get back to the business of this country. We need to get back to work, and that's what's going to help this economy.
Thank you, candidate LaVorn. We'll stay with you. And our next question, shifting from the economy to foreign policy, is from Shelley Rodman.
Our country has been in the Paris Climate Accord and then out of the accord, in the Iran nuclear agreement and then out of the agreement, a supporter of the World Health Organization and a critic of the World Health Organization, now threatening to leave. What is the responsibility of a member of Congress of the Massachusetts 2nd District to define the place of the U.S. in the world?
And it's to you.
Candidate LaVorn.
So what is the place of our U.S. Congressional, U.S. representative to define our place in the world? That was a big that was a big question with a lot in there. Obviously, we always want to stand up, and again, like I said previously, we want to be a leader in the world. However, we want to make sure that we're taking care of our interest and our people first. You know, when you're on an airplane and that airplane light goes off and the masks come down, what is the first thing they tell you to do? They always tell you to put your mask on first and then assist the people next to you. Then you assist your child. Then you assist the elderly person next to you. Because if you are not there to help, there's nothing left. There's nothing more you can do. You know, we're a beacon of light in this world. As long as we are healthy and strong and we're doing what we need to do, that's all we can ask for. You know, I think as a congressional member, we want to make sure that the information that we're given is correct. And yes, I believe in science. I've been in healthcare for 20 years. I'm a Medicare certified Medicare surveyor. I go to facilities and I make sure that they have all their policies and procedures in place and that they have all their, you know, their infection control processes. I know science. But I also know that there's, for every one scientist saying this, another one saying that. And so I want to make sure that I get as much information as possible, not just from one side, but for all sides. And then I want to make sure that I share that with every single member of this district so that they can make informed choices, and then we can move forward together.
Congressman.
That's a good question. Look, I chair the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission in Congress. It's named after Congressman Tom Lantos, the only Holocaust survivor that ever served in the United States Congress. I chair the Congressional Executive Commission on China, along with Marco Rubio in the Senate. I think that one of the things that we need to do is define U.S. foreign policy in terms of human rights. We need to have human rights at the centerpiece of our foreign policy, and that, unfortunately, you know, has not been a priority of this administration, nor has been cooperation with our friends. He has seemed to want to cozy up to people like Vladimir Putin and Erdogan of Turkey, who jails judges. He says he wants to be tough on President Xi in China, yet we found out from John Bolton that President Trump gave President Xi the green light to basically put Uyghur Muslims in concentration camps in Xinjiang. He's done nothing to help those freedom fighters, those fighting for freedom and democracy in Hong Kong. He's invited President Duterte, who's a barbarian, to the White House for a White House dinner, and he's been an apologist for the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who had a Washington Post journalist murdered and dismembered. Look, people around the world, human rights defenders around the world, want to know what happened here. You know, the United States used to be a voice for human rights, and all of a sudden we have ceased to be that voice. I will tell you, we need to prioritize human rights. We need to prioritize ending global hunger and extreme poverty, because ultimately that will make us more secure. That will create a more secure world where you're not going to see the upheavals that unfortunately that you're seeing right now.
Candidate LeBorn, a minute to you.
I'm just going to go ahead and pass. I mean, it's obvious that we already know that Congressman McGovern absolutely hates POTUS. I just want to remind people that he is not running against Trump. He's running against Tracy. We've heard it all before already, Congressman. We know how much you hate this president. You've made that perfectly clear. And you've also made it clear over the last almost 4 years now of not doing anything, working with this administration, trying to help us in our district. Instead, he's working against this president over and over again. And honestly, we're the only victims in it. We are the only victims. When the rest of this whole country and when the rest of the state of Massachusetts were booming in an economy, Worcester still lagged behind. At one point, you're just going to have to figure out that, you know what, you got to work together with people sometimes, not just your own party.
Congressman, a final minute to you.
So I don't hate anybody. That's the way my parents raised me. And so let me say that at the very beginning. And I have, and I think clearly listening to this debate and following your social media, a vote for Tracy is a vote for Trump. And I think that's a relevant connection because it goes to character. We have a president who calls veterans losers and who makes fun of who disparages John McCain, says he's not a real war hero. We have a president who is probably the most corrupt president in our history. Almost all of his top campaign officials have been convicted of felonies. His former national security advisor has pleaded guilty to 2 felonies. And we have a president who wants to take your health care away. In the middle of a pandemic, he is going before the Supreme Court trying to take away your health care, including taking away protections for people with pre-existing conditions. So this is an issue, this is a matter of character, and it is relevant in this debate.
Congressman, the next question is for you, sticking with the subject of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our next question is for Malthus.
Some governors in the country have praised the administration about handling the pandemic, while others have criticized it, even going against their own party line in some instances. Are you satisfied with the federal government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic? Why or why not?
I am not. I gave it a failing grade. My opponent gave it a strong B in an interview she did with the Telegram. Here we look at us right now. I mean, we are having a debate. We have to be carefully spaced apart. None of our supporters can come in here because it's not safe. Is that success? Is that a successful strategy? We have no national strategy. No national strategy on testing, no national strategy on tracing, no national strategy on treatment. The president lied to us. He told us as late as March that this was a hoax, when he knew in January what was about to happen. And maybe if he had told us what was happening, the governors that oversee our nursing homes could have better prepared our nursing homes so many people would not have died. I mean, nobody was told anything. His delay and his denial has been deadly. It's been criminal. And even now, as we're being told by his own CDC, to wear masks, he is holding super spreader events all across the country where there are people lined up not wearing masks. We just read an article in Minnesota about how they traced a spike in COVID infections to his rally in Minnesota. I mean, look, and then yesterday he basically called Dr. Fauci and scientists idiots. So I ask people who are watching here today, I mean, do you think that that's a success? I mean, is that a solid B? I mean, this is a failure. And one of the reasons why I am so dedicated to replacing him in November is because we need somebody who is competent, who listens to scientists and listens to medical experts, and will develop a plan to crush this virus, to save lives, and then a plan to get this economy back on its feet.
Candidate LeBorn.
Yeah, I gave the president a B, and this is why. Listening to scientists going back in early March, Fauci and a I believe 4 other scientists said if we do absolutely nothing in preparation for this pandemic, we would lose 2.2 million American lives within the year. Dr. Birx said back in March that if we did everything perfect, we would lose 200,000 lives this year. We are far from doing everything perfect, but we are better on track than 2.2 million. If you look at the case fatality rate across this world, the United States has a 2.8% fatality rate. Right down in Mexico is over 10%, right up in Canada is over 7%, and I believe the United Kingdom is right around 7-8% as well. So yes, we've done a fairly good job. You know where we have done an absolutely horrific job is right here in the state of Massachusetts, right here in Congressional District 2, where 4 out of 5 of our deaths have been in our skilled nursing facilities. We knew back in February that it was going to hit our elderly, sick population. We knew that because in Washington State, 30 people died in a life care center. We knew this, Congressman. Where were you? You were walking out of a State of the Union address. A State of the Union address where POTUS did address coronavirus. And yes, you know what? We could have done something. If I was your U.S. representative, I would have reached out to the Department of Health and Human Services, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. I would have reached out to Charlie Baker. I would have gotten the results from every state survey, and I would have been able to identify every facility in this state that had a bad time, struggled with staffing, and people that with their infection control processes. We could have proactively gotten them the help they needed, and we could have saved thousands of lives instead of just running around pointing fingers, casting blame, saying we were playing Hunger Games, trying to get PPE. We could have actually helped and done something.
Ms. LeBourne, you don't know what you're talking about, quite frankly. One is the president in March was saying this was a hoax. He refused to invoke the Defense Production Act. I was on the phone with the White House begging for ventilators at the request of Charlie Baker to get to this state. We opened up an emergency healthcare facility here with UMass in the DCU Center, and a couple of days before they opened, they didn't know if they had enough PPE for the patients and for the medical professionals who are working there. Shame on this administration. What they did is criminal. What they did is criminal. And this is the difference. This is the difference. The idea that somehow it was fine for the president to basically say there's nothing happening here and do nothing, and basically put everybody at risk, including all those people in nursing homes, not alerting the governors, that is criminal. And that can never, ever happen again. And so now, as we meet here today, we are seeing surges all over the country because we don't have a plan. That is not a success. You can call it a solid B, I call it an F. That's a difference between you and I.
Candidate LeBourne.
Now, a difference between you and I is that across the country, 40% of the coronavirus deaths are attributed to skilled nursing. Here in our district, 80% of the deaths are attributed to skilled nursing, sir. I do know what I'm talking about. I've worked in skilled nursing for over 20 years of my career. I know what was needed. You, sir, could have helped, and you did not. You did not help. All he had to do was reach out to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the Department of Health and Human Services, reached out to Charlie Baker. You could have identified what facilities needed the help, and you could have gotten them that help. Because yeah, we had a facility right here at the DCU Center that went almost unused. We had doctors and nurses on furlough that we could have asked to help. We had a National Guard that we could have called in to help. If you didn't know what you were doing, you should have reached out. I could have helped you, sir. Thousands of people have died, and it's all because we did not give them the help that they needed.
We're going to stay right on healthcare, and our next question is from Robert Cox on the subject of healthcare.
On the subject of healthcare. On the subject of healthcare, on November 10th, the United States Supreme Court will hear arguments on whether the Affordable Care Act is constitutional in whole or in part. The court is expected to rule on the matter before the term ends of this coming year, ends in June 2021. Do you support the repeal of the Affordable Care Act, in part or in full? Why or why not?
The first response from candidate LaVorn on healthcare.
The Affordable Care Act has been around now for over 10 years. They passed that, they pushed that through the House, they passed it without even reading it. The hope was at the time that somebody would have eventually gotten around to read it and then actually worked on it to make it better. But the fact is it hasn't. It hasn't made anything better. When you look at the Affordable Care Act, all it's done is made the cost of health care skyrocket. Nothing has focused on the cost of health care. The cost of health care in the United States is astronomical. However, there's something we can do about it. 5% of our population is responsible for 50% of the healthcare cost. 20% of our population is responsible for 80% of the healthcare cost. There is so much that we can do with preventative medicine and targeting. The number one cause of death in this country, over 600,000 people a year die of cardiovascular disease. So much of that, yes, some of it is because of genetics, but so much of it is preventable with diet, with exercise. Look how much money we spend on diabetes. You know, there's so much that we can do with prevention. As a physical therapist, I know how important that is. We also need to federally subsidize states to be able to have a fund to be able to cover people's costs for extreme expenses. Nobody that has private insurance should go bankrupt because they're trying to treat their cancer. That's absolutely horrific. But if we take those huge expenses off the few and we decrease the amount of treatments necessary that are preventable, the cost savings is phenomenal. If that cost savings is there, the price is going to go down. If we can increase competition between state lines, the cost will go down. Yes, it'll make it affordable and attainable for every American.
Congressman.
So the question I understand was do we favor repealing the Affordable Care Act? The answer is no. And the president couldn't get it repealed in a Republican-controlled Senate. John McCain was the deciding vote against outright repeal. And he did that because he knew that there was no replacement plan. And he knew that if the Affordable Care Act was repealed, that millions of people would lose their health care. That people with pre-existing conditions would lose their health care or have to pay exorbitant prices to maintain their health care. He knew that it would be wrong to tell parents that you can no longer keep your kids on your insurance until they were 26. And he knew that all the essential benefit guarantees in the Affordable Care Act, including some preventative care, Ms. LaVorn, would have been erased. So he's gone to the Supreme Court, and he's trying to pack the court to get it overturned in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, how unbelievably insensitive and cruel is that? I mean, if he has a better plan, then present it. He's been in office for 4 years. I mean, the Republicans, when they controlled the Congress, I mean, I think it was like 20 times that we voted to repeal it and had no replacement. The idea that you want to repeal something outright in the middle of a pandemic with no replacement is not only irresponsible, it is cruel. And let me just say one other thing. The president said he wants us to be number one. He's made us number one in terms of COVID-19, coronavirus infections and deaths in the world. Now, everybody who has been infected and who has been lucky enough to survive now have a pre-existing condition. And he is going before the Supreme Court to take those protections away. I mean, I ask people who are watching, do you think that he has your interests at heart when he's doing that?
Candidate LaVorn.
We just witnessed it again. Fear tactic after fear tactic with not a lot of facts involved. You talk about pre-existing conditions. Pre-existing conditions impacts, I believe Biden said 150 million Americans will be impacted by this pre-existing existence conditions being repealed. Let's look at that number though real quick. 122 million of those 150 million are on either Medicaid or Medicare. Neither one of those has a pre-existing conditions clause. So now we're down to about 30 million people. So now look at, let's see, who works for state or federal governments? Oh, another over 20 million people. Now we're down to about 10 million people, Congressman, that may be affected by pre-existing conditions. Now let's look at who works for strong unions, who works for big corporations. There is not one insurance out there that disqualifies you for pre-existing conditions. Who does that is the person who's purchasing that, which is most likely a big corporation. Big corporations include that. So now we're down to maybe 5,000 people that would be impacted, 5 million people that would be impacted by the pre-existing conditions clause. That's still a lot of people. I still support them, but that is just one example of how he takes a number, twists it around, lies to you directly, creates fear, and makes it out that Republicans are big bad monsters. It's absolutely ridiculous. Do your homework on some of this, guys. It's awful. We hear it over and over again. The Affordable Care Act was supposed to cover over 40 million people. It ended up covering about 23 million people. 15 million of them was an expansion of Medicaid, which people could have got anyway from their states. We're talking about the Affordable Care Act that is covering right now between 5 and 10 million people in the United States.
Congressman, to you.
So if you believe that, I'll sell you the Sagamore Bridge for $10. I mean, the bottom line is that that's just not accurate. I will also tell you that the Medicaid expansion was part of the Affordable Care Act. So if it gets repealed, that also is in question. Look, you know, my view is that we need to not only not repeal the Affordable Care Act, we need to build on it. I believe we got to have a public option, at least at the beginning. And I'm somebody who also believes we got to have a Medicare for all proposal, because I do think that we can do better in healthcare. And I think there's so many middlemen and middlewomen in our healthcare system that we're paying through the nose for insurance in a way that, quite frankly, is not only not cost effective, but is bankrupting, you know, average families. People are afraid to get sick. Now, the Affordable Care Act made some steps in the right direction, actually focused more on preventative care, and forced insurance companies to not to drop people because of pre-existing conditions, and forced insurance companies to actually cover some of this preventative care. So, repealing it, I think, is irresponsible.
Congressman, we'll stay with you. And our final question is on. This is.
Well, then I'm going to ask
you started. Yeah. So our final question, we're switching gears, will be about the election process, and it comes from Shelley Rodman.
You are both asking people for their vote. How are you assuring your supporters, friends, and neighbors that they should vote in this election? That their vote, whether they vote by mail, early in person, or on November 3rd in person, will count, and that the result of the election will be legitimate and one that you will accept?
Yeah, we'll start with the Congressman.
Well, that's a very good question. A lot of people are asking me that now, especially when the president won't give a straight answer to, you know, will he respect a peaceful transition of power if he were to lose, or whether or not he would go to the Supreme Court and seek an injunction essentially to stop counting absentee ballots. So I get it why people are confused. But really what that is a voter suppression tactic. What he's trying to do is sow confusion and fear amongst the population into believing, oh, my vote doesn't matter, so I'm not going to go vote. I mean, that's his tactic, voter suppression. So we have to be vigilant about that. The voting process itself, I believe, has integrity. The president was mad when he lost the 2016 election by 3 million votes to Hillary Clinton. So he put together this kind of kangaroo court to try to prove that there was election fraud. Guess what? He dismantled it prematurely because they couldn't find anything. So that went by the wayside. Now he says that there's thousands of ballots here and thousands of ballots here. Let me just tell you about Massachusetts. We have a good system in place, with checks and balances. You have to apply for a mail-in ballot or an absentee ballot. You have to then sign your actual ballot, and they can compare your signature in the clerk's office. That is the way it has always been done. So this is a process with integrity in this state, and everybody should vote. The final thing I'm going to say, and I will say this is a serious issue. We also have to worry about foreign interference in our election. I was briefed before I came back to Massachusetts. The Russians are back in this election, meddling in a way even worse than in 2016. So there's lots of disinformation out there. So those who are watching, please, verify some of these conspiracy theories, because it may be coming from a Russian source.
Candidate LaVorn.
I don't even know where to start with that. I think I'll start right here in Massachusetts. You can go online to the Secretary of State's website, and you can request a ballot to be mailed to you. You do not have to provide a signature. You can just press the button, attest to it, and they don't even have to mail it to you to your address. They will mail it to you to anywhere you tell them to. There is no signature validation required in Massachusetts any longer. And if you look at, I'm getting phone calls every day. Every day somebody's contacting me saying, Tracy, I just got another ballot with my name spelled slightly different. Tracy, I just got another ballot for my mom who passed away 5 years ago. Tracy, I just got ballots in the mail for people who lived here 3 years ago that were prior tenants. That's here in Massachusetts. Here in Massachusetts, in Franklin, just during the primary, they found, 2,000-3,000 ballots after the election when they were recounting the ballots. So yes, we have a problem here in Massachusetts. For people to say that we need to increase safety, so we need to do mass mail-in balloting, my first question would be, we already had absentee ballots. We already had this process in place. Why did we have to change it? And why now are we taking away the signature requirement? The second thing I would ask is, if you are going to do that, then what are you going to do to make sure that there's safety procedures in place so that obvious, just logical things don't happen to mess up the voting? Just here in Norfolk, Massachusetts, over Columbus Day weekend, it was a holiday weekend, 4 boxes of blank ballots were delivered to the town offices and just left out in front for a couple days before the people came to get them. There is no security at all. And if there is no security for our election, then yes, you need to question the validity of the election. And it is appalling that we have a congressman that is not enforcing the United States to have a valid election.
Congressman.
So I don't even know where to begin. First of all, ballots are just not automatically mailed to people. You have to request them. All right? Secondly, when you submit your ballot, you have to have a signature. I mean, that's just a fact. If you don't believe me, call the Secretary of State's office. You can verify that. Yes, you can apply online during this COVID-19 pandemic, but there are lots of questions that you have to answer, and the state has already rejected some people who have not filled out the application appropriately. The final thing I'm going to say is voter fraud, Ms. LaVorn, is a crime. You can go to jail for it. So if you know of somebody who's committing voter fraud, if you have somebody who's hoarding ballots, please report it to the Attorney General's office or the Secretary of State, and they will be promptly arrested, because it is a crime. So let's stop the scare tactics. This is a voter suppression technique. This is something that's coming right out of the Republican National Committee, so to try to dissuade people from voting. Please vote. If you have questions, call the Secretary of State's office.
Candidate LaVorn, a final minute to you.
You know, it's not a voter suppression by any means. I know everybody that I know will walk through fire to go to the polls and vote this election. And everybody that I know are going to go on election day, November 3rd, to make sure that their vote actually counts. There is no reason why safety could not have been addressed when you're talking about doing mass mail-in. The only reason why you would not address the security of these ballots is if you were looking to tamper with the ballots. That's just fact. No doubt about it.
Great. So at this time, we will allow each candidate the opportunity to give a 2-minute closing remark. Since the congressman went first in his opening remarks, I would invite candidate Lavorne to go first in her closing remarks. Candidate Lavorne.
The congressman just brought up again Russia. Russia, Russia, Russia. How many times, Congressman, are you going to continue to say something that has been just 100% debunked? It has been debunked, and anybody that's paying attention already knows about it. There is so much information out there, it's absolutely disgusting to continue to hear you talk about it. We have, I'll walk you through it. All right, it's pretty simple. We had the Steele dossier. The Steele dossier was paid for by Hillary Clinton and the DNC. We know this. We know that John McCain gave it to the FBI, and we know that the FBI got the FISA warrant because of it. And we know that because of that approved FISA warrant, that yes, the Trump campaign was spied on. And yet, Russia, 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 here you are doing it again. We know that Ukraine, we had the first most partisan impeachment in the House history. Most partisan in history in the middle of a pandemic. You want to talk about being in the middle of a pandemic? You were celebrating and Nancy Pelosi was handing out pens when Donald Trump was closing the borders. It's absolutely horrific what's happening in this country right now. It is so extremely partisan. Our congressman is one of the most partisan members of the House. You know, last election I made mention that he voted with Nancy Pelosi 95% of the time. Now it's 99% of the time. We are central and western Massachusetts. We are not Northern California. If we continue to just fight the administration, what is that going to get us? You know what? Jim McGovern has been in office for Democrats. He's been in office for Republicans. He's been in office when he's been in the minority. He's been in office when he's had the majority. We still need immigration reform. We still have an opioid epidemic to address. We still have infrastructure needs. We still have Puerto Rico that we need to help. We need to change. I'm offering that change, and I'm asking for your vote.
Thank you very much, candidate Lavorne. Congressman McGovern, your final statement.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Lavorne, and thank you to the sponsors of the debate, but most importantly, I want to thank those at home who are watching this debate today. You know, 2 weeks from tonight, America is going to head to the polls to decide our future. It's a sacred ritual that's gone on uninterrupted every 2 years since 1789 until today. My friend John Lewis always used to say that the right to vote is precious. He would say it was almost sacred. And everyone, whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent, please get out and vote. It is important. In politics, what matters most is not what you're against, but what you're for. COVID-19 magnified many of the problems and inequalities that we face in this country. And I often hear people say to me that they want to go back to normal. My response to them is normal wasn't good enough. We can and we must do better. Our Constitution calls it the work to build a more perfect union. We all need to leave this country better than how we found it. Tonight, I've talked about some of the results that I've gotten working to make things better. And I want to continue fighting to make things not just better, but more just and more fair and more decent. You know, I began this debate by saying that we face a crisis of character that asks who we want to be as Americans. Well, I believe we will all come through this crisis stronger because I believe in the goodness of the American people. I believe in the decency of the American people. You know, none of us can change the past, but together we all can help shape a better future. I humbly ask for your vote. Stay healthy and stay safe, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to thank both candidates, candidate LaVorn and Congressman McGovern, for a great debate tonight. Although a little different from years past, I think the viewers at home appreciated hearing from both of you on your views on many of these topics. I also want to thank our moderators, Amalphus Rodriguez, Robert Cox, and Shelley Rodman. I want to thank our timekeepers, Alex Guardiola, David Sullivan, and of course, we want to thank the Mercantile Center for giving us this beautiful space to use. Please remember that on November 3rd is Election Day. Your last day to register to vote is October 24th. If you have any questions about registering, polling locations, or early voting, please visit vote.org or telegram.com for more information. Thank you again to all of you and have a great night.